sleep, repeat.
I'm John Baker, and for about, actually more years than I care to remember, I've been into coaching and training people that run their own businesses. So for a number of years, about 20 odd years, I was working for a large corporate, and I was working with franchisees who've got kind of 10 million turnover businesses, and that was great fun. And then I went on to be training sales teams around Europe, and that was brilliant. I loved it. And then I suddenly went, whoa. Two things struck me. One was I was actually fed up. I know it sounds really bad, because people nowadays say to me, oh, that expense account lifestyle must be brilliant. And it's not, because it means you get up at whatever time in the morning you need to get up, because you've got a young family. You don't want to always be staying away. You travel over to Dusseldorf for 9 o'clock German time, which is 8 o'clock UK time, which means you get up and leave the house at 5 in the morning. And then you get back about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and you're absolutely whacked. So it's not as good as it made out to be. I loved it. And then I said, well, what I'd like to do is combine those sets of skills and start working with local business owners. And so that was kind of when I became self-employed. And that was now, that was about 15, 16 years ago now. And since then, I worked with numbers of business owners, started to realize I was getting better results with some of the quieter ones. And we were just really firing up, and we were really clicking. And so I had a background in leadership and sales. I'd started coaching, and then about 2 years ago, I left the business I was in. I'd formed a business with a business partner of mine. We focused on a particular element of coaching in the UK. I sold my half of that back to her because I wanted to restructure my life. Imagine this, a coach taking their own advice and going, put your life first and everything else the other way around. Yeah. And that's what I did. And I'm really, really pleased. But at that point, I was kind of saying, well, what am I going to specialise in? And I suddenly realised, well, A, the best results I've ever had have come from introverts. B, I am an introvert, despite some people say, John, you can't be an introvert, you wet orange. But finally, I think I was almost incensed by the lack of understanding in introversion that was around, and the fact that so many people, particularly leaders, just bulldoze over other introverts and people that run their own business. Funnily enough, there's a lot of people that run their own businesses which are introverts. And I'm never sure whether that's they got out of the corporate world because they were struggling as an introvert or why, but there were a number of people running their own business are quite introverted. And of course, they struggle to stand out in networking events. They struggle to, sometimes they say, I can't sell because I'm an introvert. None of which is true, of course. And so that's where I started to focus on introversion, and that's where it really came from.
Yeah, you hit on a few points there, actually. So you said that a lot of people that are self-employed are introverted. I find that really interesting, because I would agree with that. A lot of people that I know who are more introverted are self-employed, and the people who I've kind of got into conversation about it and the reasons why and why they like it, I think even myself, I think when you're working when you're working for somebody else, sometimes there's a lot of things that you disagree with. I know for me, I worked in retail for 11 years. I worked my way up the management ladder, and I was kind of like aiming for like area manager, that type of thing. And then I got this really like nice job in a really expensive handbag shop, and it was so nice. I had to fly over to the UK once a month for these manager meetings, and there was loads of perks with the job and stuff, as similar to what you were saying yourself. And it seemed kind of fancy to people looking inward, but I think that job, actually, even though it was a nice company to work for, made me realise that it wasn't satisfying me enough. Like, I loved helping people and, helping people get what they needed. And I loved talking to people. I loved training staff and helping, train them with their strengths and all of that stuff. But I remember just thinking to myself, there's so much more to life than a €500 handbag, And after that job, I decided to leave. I went part-time and became self-employed. That was like 5 years ago. And I've honestly been so much happier since then. Although it's been difficult, because being self-employed is difficult. There's a lot more there's a lot of different challenges that come with it. But when you're an introverted person and you're self-employed, you can make your own rules and you can create your own little safety net around you. Whereas when you're working for somebody else, you don't have control over that, which can be quite difficult.
I completely agree. So I think the control thing is really important. The ability to go, right, I need to do this for me. I need to, whether it's at a big event and you're surrounded by people, or whether you're just, as you said earlier, I was kind of really, really busy and no, I need to stop. I need to just take it at my pace right now. The ability to do that is huge. And in that sense, we're incredibly lucky as self-employed people. However, to do that, you need to recognise it. So well done for being able to recognise when you need it. Many people don't, and they keep on going until they're broken.
It took, sometimes we know we're not comfortable in our skin, but we don't necessarily recognise what it is. And it took me a while to look back and go, now I know why there always seemed to be something stressful, but I could never quite put my finger on it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But when you kind of start, because I know I went on a little bit of a self-discovery thing, and I was trying to figure myself out and figure out what I was. So I went down the route of the what's it called, the Myers-Briggs Tests, and kind of reading up about my personality type and how that kind of affects you, the way you navigate through the world, and into introvertedness and all that kind of side of things, and kind of started seeing then what it was that was making me feel so uncomfortable, But I know I told you that I did a survey around the start of the summer, just a really basic survey, kind of asking people about their experiences as kind of creative introverts, who as creative people, my podcast is mainly for singers and people who work with singers. So, and other people listen to it as well who work in the kind of music industry and that kind of thing. And a lot of people who are musicians especially are very introverted, and part of being a self-employed musician is having to promote yourself, having to go to networking events. It's about being a good hang, so people will want to work with you. And those things are really difficult for introverts. So
incredibly hard, yeah.
How do we navigate that?
Hard. I think I'm going to come back to that in a second if I can, Rebecca, because I think you just touched on something which is really, really interesting that you may not have realised, or some of your listeners may not have realised. I do a lot of public speaking, and I'm quite often up on stage, and people will say to me, John, you cannot possibly be an introvert because you like public speaking, you like standing up on stage. And at first I just thought, maybe I'm weird. Then I realised, no, I'm not. And to which my answer became, you don't understand introversion. And then I learned a bit more, because as I started to spend a lot more time with other professional speakers, I started to realise that huge numbers of them are introverted. And yet, people would say, you can't be introverted because you like all that attention being put on you while you're up on stage. And then I went a bit further and realised just how many actors and musicians are also introverted. And there's huge numbers. And yet the general public will say, you can't be introverted because you like being up on stage. So if your listeners are kind of going, oh yeah, I'm introverted. Well, actually, you've already covered one of the big things. You've already worked out that being up and getting all of that attention isn't something that people assume about introversion, because they automatically assume you're extrovert if you want to do that. So you've already jumped out the stereotype, if I can put it like that, just by going, hey, yes, I'm an introvert and I like being up on stage. And you've started to develop that. So I think one of the things that I then start to realise that's important about it is that when you're up on stage, there are some people that are, all the attention is, yeah, it's me, look at me, aren't I great, I'm wonderful, my music wonderful, or whatever it might be. And then you start to realise that there's others who, whether they're speaking to, and they're all really tuned into the audience, whether it's speaking or playing music. And I was at a gig on Saturday night, and there was a couple up there, and you could tell just how tuned into the audience they were, and they really were there for the audience. And that's a skill that introverts do have incredibly well. So I raised that one, A, because it's quite interesting, but B, because then you've got to take that the other step when it comes to promoting yourself. And I think to realise why you're promoting yourself, because the reason many introverts, and I'll be honest with you, lots of extroverts, don't like selling, if I, that bring up that horrible S word, is because they meet so many salespeople who are not particularly good salespeople, who have just got massive egos, and it's, I'm wonderful, I'm wonderful, I'm wonderful. Now let me talk about, actually, tell me what you think about me. And that's basically an extroverted, egotistical conversation. And it's, for most introverts, that is the absolute antithesis of anything they'd want to be.
Yeah.
So I think, first of all, you've got to take that model. That doesn't work in sales anyway, because the biggest thing I ever learned from training sales teams around Europe, and since then having known some people, so Ben Kench is a good friend of mine. He wrote the series of books for dummies, and it was called Selling for Dummies, and he wrote that one. And there's this big thing that goes around in sales. You've got two of these and one of these. Use them in that proportion. And it's an old saying, but many people don't get it right. But as introverts, we can really get that right. We can start to listen more. That means we can ask really specific questions, at which point the person you're selling to or networking with goes, oh, wow, they're really listening to me. Oh, wow, it's about me. It's about my problems. It's about what I'm trying to solve. And that's huge, because we know what most people do when most people are being sold to. It's like, oh, will you shut up talking about yourself?
Yeah.
And I know I'm not the only one, but I'm sure you've met salespeople like that as well, Rebecca.
100%. Like, even when you walk through a supermarket and there's like, the Sky salesman and things like that, it's it just feels disingenuous, It's kind of like, so like when I was in retail, part of it was disingenuous because I had kind of scripts that I'd follow, things that you had to say, things that you had to sell, and things that you had to add on at the counter. To me, they're the bits that crushed my soul and made me feel like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable in this. But there was also a sincerity to it as well, because I personally really enjoyed chatting to people and making them feel good and helping them get what they wanted, even if it was just a bottle of spray or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think a couple of things there is that you said about putting the focus on wanting to help other people can take some anxiety off us from getting too caught up in our own heads. But I also think there's possibly a danger there of becoming a people pleaser, which I think a lot of introverts are, because they don't want to rock the boat.
Okay. And I can see why people will say that. And in the end of the day, just pleasing people is not going to get you sales. But the point is, you've got to understand the issues that the other person's struggling with, suffering from, however you want to phrase it, so that you can tailor what you can do to what they need. And I think that's the important point. You're not just talking to them and listening so that you can be nice. You're talking to them and listening so you can capture clues, if I can put it like that, where you can go, I can help with that. I can help with that. And I can help with that. And the reason I've got up three fingers there isn't because what some people do, they hear this little clue and they go, I can help with that, and then start talking.
Yeah.
Get the first clue and keep listening a bit longer. Get the second clue, keep listening a bit longer. Get three. Now you know there's some definite meaty stuff that you can help with. Now, still, rather than going into the I can help you, ask them some more about thing number one and thing number two and thing number three. So now you start to dig into it, because now you can really start to understand them and what they want. So at that point, you're nowhere near people pleasing at all. You're really understanding because you have a specific mission. You're only asking questions about these three things because those are three things that they want and you already can help with. So the only reason for asking those questions is because you can help. So
you're by being just authentic about what you can help other people with, what you have to give as a person who's selling, as a singing teacher, as a musician, and finding people who need what you have to give, listening out for those things. Like you said, oh, I can do that. I can help with that. I can help with that. And then it becomes really genuine conversation because you're being honest about your experiences and what your strengths are. And you're saying, hey, I see you because I've been through the same thing. Let me help.
Yeah.
You know, and then it becomes a more valuable conversation.
Absolutely. And it's a mile away from just saying things that please people. And I think that's a really important point. But at the same time, you're miles away from the other bit, which is, look at me, I'm great. Because that's not something most introverts like. And you mentioned networking earlier. And I think networking, especially for a business owner, so whether it's a singing teacher, singer themselves, I guess. I've not met many singers. I've met quite a few singing teachers. But most people that run a business find that networking is a great way to develop business.
Yeah, 100%.
And yet, and I know your survey, when we were talking off air, your survey said, I think it was 59%. My survey says 65%, and other surveys I've seen are even higher, of introverts do not like networking. So here's this problem. We've got this thing that we know is important for our business, and yet we don't like doing it. There's a couple of interesting things there. Firstly, there's many extroverts that don't like networking either. So don't get into this camp, which lots of people do. Oh, I'm an introvert. I don't like networking. All the people at networking are extroverts. That's why I don't like it. Therefore, I'm no good at it. That's a really bad way of applying a label, the label of being an introvert.
Yeah.
I can talk about labels for a long time, but they are really, so many people work down to the label rather than going, okay, that's great. I'm an introvert. What can that teach me? Great, move on. So first of all, don't use it as a label. Many extroverts don't like it either. And I think that's a really important point. But the next thing is, what is networking? Because most people assume that networking is, whether it's breakfast or lunch or evening meal or just those horrible, I mean, all those three make me cringe a little bit, but those horrible big afternoon events where there's hundreds of people standing around and you have to walk up and shake people's hands and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then people go, that's networking. Well, as an introvert, you are going to struggle with that more than extroverts. Not because you're no good at networking, not because you don't like people, but simply because you will find being with people more tiring. Whereas extroverts find it energizing. So first of all, if it's a long event, and this is where you've got to know yourself and the event and how you are. But if it's a long event, go there with the specific knowledge of the fact that you will get more tired, because that's the real definition of introvert. It's about people energy. Hang on, I've been around people far too long. I'm starting to flag. And by the way, there is some science to that. It's all about dopamine levels in your body. But the reason I say that is because if you turn up with the aim of going, well, I'm going to break this event into chunks, that really helps. And I've spoken to many introverts who have told me that one. The second thing that many introverts have told me is get a role. And I don't mean those things you eat at breakfast. Get a job of some sort in the group. Because so I used to run the Professional Speaking Association's London region, where about 100 speakers would turn up once a month, and you can imagine the noise that these people were taking. Although some fantastic presentations, a lot of it was a big networking event, and there was quite a few introverts in there. And when I did the research, they said the reason they go is because they like the networking, except they're rubbish at networking. So what they'd done, they've asked me if there was a job that I could give them to do. So they would be meeters and greeters, or they would be helping the speakers, or there was a number of jobs that most organisers of most events would love somebody to do.
Yeah.
If you've got one of those jobs, then what happens is, in the conversation, it becomes really easy to walk up. Hi, Rebecca, I'm John. I'm here today because and you can do whatever your role is, whether you're meeting and greeting. It's almost like putting on this coat, like my coat of invincibility. Because I am being me, but to get into the conversation, I've got the excuse of this job, which I'm doing, which is an official job. Many, many introverts have found that helps. The most important bit, it helps though. A couple of minutes later, when you're into this conversation, and apologise, I'm going to use your name in vain now, but it's kind of, I'm sitting there talking away to Rebecca, and I've gone, no, don't go on with Rebecca. And you ever had a conversation like that where you think, oh, how do I get out of this conversation? And your energy just starts to dip like somebody stuck a nail into a balloon. But the official role thing is great, because that means I can then say, Rebecca, it's been great to meet you. I've got to go and name the next part of the official job you've got to do. And you can walk away. And it's far more easy than having to come up with some other excuse for walking away. So get yourself a role, because that can help hugely. And even if you don't get a role because you're only going to go there once, there's one other trick that I've learned, and I do quite a lot, which is to think of something which you can do with your own business. So if it's singing, teaching, perhaps you can invent a survey. And I do a lot of surveys into introversion, so I do that a lot. But if you're a singing teacher, maybe you want to know how many people think they can't sing, or any piece of information that could genuinely help you. But then I can walk up to somebody and, hi, Rebecca, my name's John. I'm doing a piece of research. I wonder if you'd help me, please. And of course, everyone's always happy to help, but that's a really easy way to get into a conversation. And then I ask you the question, might be about singing. Do you believe that you can sing? Great. Well, that's one more person asks, and one more person says they can't, or whatever it might be. And inevitably from that, we have a bit more conversation if you want to. And then you go, actually, I'll really get on with this person. You've just flowed into a conversation. You've cut out a lot of the small talk that introverts really, really hate. And of course, if it didn't go well, you've got a great piece of research at which you can say, thank you so much, Rebecca. You've been an incredible help. What I need to do now is I've set myself a goal of asking 50 people at this event, and off you go, and you talk to somebody else. And so you're not losing all that energy. So what I've been talking about is ways to make the event better, if I can put it like that.
It's like, to me, I'm just hearing, find a way in any networking event to get some control back. And by having a role, you're in that kind of gives you kind of like some parameters. It gives you a bit of safety. You know what's happening. You know what you have to do. You know certain things that you have to say. So it's like, absolutely, by having kind of a plan in place, it kind of gives you more control, which will give you more confidence then at the event. And it gets you into that conversation, which is important. But you know you can get out again, and that for many introverts is equally important. And the other thing, of course, that goes on, as I just alluded to, is lots of small talk. And introverts tend not to like small talk. View it as something that's important, because if you're going to get into a piece of conversation, you're going to have to warm up your conversation, if I can put it like that. It's about like limbering up before you go and play on stage. You've got to warm up. So the small talk is a little bit like that. It gets you to the right parts of the conversation. It's like a lubricant. So think of a couple of things that you can say. And the best things are generally shared things. So it's a great event, isn't it? I love events like this because wasn't she a fantastic musician? I love the way she said. Make it genuine, make it authentic. Yeah.
But suddenly you're into a conversation about something which you can start to bring back to a normal conversation. Even if it's just as little as, I do love the decor in this venue, don't you?
Yeah.
I love the colour of the room. I love whatever it is. Pick something that is shared between you and the person you're having the conversation with, because then you've both got that same piece of thing that you can talk about. So that's a way to get into the small talk and make it move on to better conversation.
Would you say, like, because most people I know don't like small talk, it's always a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes you hit it off with someone and it's just like, it's great. But I think it's because it's like, because sometimes you're grabbing at things to say. So would you say that if we just look at it as that it's part of the process, that everyone accepts that small talk is a bit shit. Yep. But once we get over that, then we can move on to something else. So if we just accept it and...
Yeah, but you've got to go through it. And, so many people, I'm not going networking to a networking event because I hate small talk. Well, you've got to get through that to get to know somebody. And as I said, just find ways that work for you. If you can have a bit of conversation about 2 or 3 different things, the food at the event, the singer, the decor, whatever it might be, things that you can talk about positively, by the way. It's no good going, wasn't so-and-so rubbish, because immediately they're categorising you as a negative person. They don't want to talk to you. So things that you can genuinely talk about in a positive way that are shared with the other person, a couple of those, And now you're into a much more comfortable piece of conversation where you can talk about you, where you can talk about what you do, where you can talk about how you help other people. So I think those are really good things about the event. But the really important thing I wanted to touch on about networking is many people, extroverts and introverts, don't like networking events. They don't like small talk. They don't like all the things we just talked about. And so those are tips to get through that. But they are not networking.
Okay.
Networking is not big events.
Right.
What networking is something that introverts are incredibly good at doing, if they only but realised it. Networking is about knowing who you know that you could help and they can help you.
Yeah.
And then going, who are the most important 4 or 5 people in my network? That's the beginning of some really good networking. So let me just take that back a stage first.
Yeah.
So why do I want to go networking? What is my reason for going networking? And that's not about saying, I want more sales. You've got to be a lot more specific than that. I want to meet this type of person because they buy this type of product, or because I get on with them better, or because I can charge them more, or whatever it might be. But be specific about it in your head at least. So that then tells you why you want to go networking. That allows you to work out who you know that is best able to help you.
Is it kind of like speed dating, but professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. But if you've suffered that as well, haven't you? I can tell. The pain in your
never
face.
Done that.
No, I haven't. It's horrible. Yeah. It's really horrible. But the thing about put me completely off my stride.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was thinking about speed dating. I was like, oh no,
flashbacks to her.
Yeah. So yeah, the point about being specific about the type of people you want to meet is because that allows you to go, who of the people you already know is best able to help you? Mm-hmm. Now, it might be, well, I don't know, I might have heard of Rebecca, but I've never met Rebecca. But Rebecca would be great at getting me the type of referral I want. So now I can go, Rebecca needs to be one of my 5 people. But the point is about focusing on 4, 5, 6 people, not 30, not trying to meet new people every week. Focus on the most important 4 or 5 people, and then realize the next thing. You will get more results from your network the stronger the relationship between you.
Yeah.
So what can you do to improve the quality of the relationship between the 2 people? And that isn't bumping into them at a random breakfast event once every 6 months and saying, hi, Rebecca. It is about going, right, I need to understand what Rebecca's looking for so I can help Rebecca. I can give Rebecca some referrals. I need to understand a bit about Rebecca's work. So that's about us having some one-to-one meetings. That's about us having a phone chat every week or 2. That's about me putting myself out to help you. So when you go, these are people that I can help. When you concentrate on helping some other people and getting to know them, 2 things happen. One is you feel good about the process because you're helping other people. And you just said most of us like to help other people. And the other thing is that people are much more likely to want to help you. So in the one-to-one conversations, in the getting to know people, in the developing the strength of that relationship, you also need to educate them on your business, on what you're looking for, on what type of people you love to work with. And possibly even who you'd like to, do you know Mrs. Smith down the road? Or do you know people like Mrs. Smith? Because Mrs. Smith does this and this and this and this, and she'd be a fantastic client for me. Whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think something that I found good for myself is if I'm able to help people in some way. Do you know, I can offer my help in some way, or even connect to people. Connect to other people that might be able to help each other. Just finding ways to make yourself valuable and kind of make a good impression and to show people the good sides of you that they might not get to see, normally.
Absolutely.
To find ways to present yourself in the best way possible.
Yeah. But developing that relationship that you have with the person. Have we got time for a quick story? Because it's a true story for one of my clients.
Go for it.
So
I hear you're good at stories.
Raymond was a sales manager for a company, and I'd known him for a year or two because I'd met him at a networking event, funnily enough. But he came to me one day and he said, John, my sales team are selling more than me and I'm embarrassed. More importantly, I'm getting no sales from any of my networking. Can you help? So we had a chat for a while and I said, well, what is it you want from your network? I just want to get more sales. So we then talked a bit more about, he sold machinery, and he talked to me about what type of machinery and who buys that type of machinery. And then I said to him, is that useful? And he said, well, I can start to see why you're asking, because of course, the more I understand what I'm trying to do, the more I can do it. Great. So then I did this thing about, well, out of all the people you know, who are the 5 best likely to be able to help you? And so he came up with 10 names, and I said, no, 5. You know what salespeople are like? Yeah, I can do better than everything. So eventually whittled it into 5. I gave him 5 pieces of Post-it notes, and I said, write the initials of each one on there. And then I drew a triangle on a flip chart, and I said, at the top of the triangle, this is the most incredibly strong relationship, you're almost best mates. And at the bottom of the triangle, you know their name, but not much more. And then I drew some lines on there, and I talk about it a lot in the book, which we can come back to later. But then I said, right, put those 5 stickers on the triangle wherever it represents the strength of the relationship. And so we initially put them all at the top. And I said, well, that's great, but I don't believe you. Yeah, but I know all their names, and I know their families' names. But have you ever talked through in-depth business? Have you ever helped them, et cetera, et cetera? And at that point, he brought all the stickers down to about the bottom level, or just somewhere near the bottom. And I said, right, forget anything else. Just focus on those 5 people for the next 6 months, develop the relationship so you can genuinely say you've moved them up the triangle. And so we did that, and he came back to me in 6 months, and I said, how's it going? And he said, actually, I'm starting to sell more stuff to them without really trying. I'm like, yes. And I said, well, keep going then. And then I said, could you now that you've got this working for the first 5 or 6, could you now do another 4 or 5? And he said, of course I can. So he did. 12 months later, he came back to me, and I said, well, how's it going? He said, I'm selling twice as much as the rest of my team put together, and now I feel good. But all he had done was focus on the relationships rather than trying to put himself under the pressure of the selling and all those other things.
How would you... So I'm just thinking of, say, like music teachers. How would they go about making stronger connections and building the relationship with customers that they don't know yet?
So I think that's a separate thing, because what I'm talking about is what I would call networking, whereas I'm talking to somebody, let's say that's yourself, about how I can help you in the business and you can help me. Because I'm asking you, effectively, I'm doing it in a sly way, but I'm effectively asking you to find me lots of people that you know that you could pass me their details. So that's not selling, that's asking you to become my salesperson. Sneaky, but that's the way that's what networking is really trying to do. But it's trying to do it by helping the other person, by putting them in your debt, if I can put it like that, because you've helped them so much. They're much more willing to. And obviously, the thing about focus is you don't pick on somebody who I don't know any singers, so it would be pointless you asking me for singers. Therefore, you wouldn't bother focusing, and I know that sounds hard and horrible, but you wouldn't bother making me one of your 5 people because I can't help you. But by focusing on the people that might know that type of person, and then getting into the habit of speaking to them regularly, getting into the habit of looking them up on LinkedIn, seeing what they're saying on LinkedIn, the very least you could do would be to like it. If you could add some supportive comment, that's great. Getting to understand what they're looking for. So even if you're just writing supportive comments on their LinkedIn, you're helping them. You're going, hello, don't forget me. So when you do next speak to them, when you next bump into them as if by accident, ha, 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 I don't know where they were going, so I just went there. They already know you. So you're coming to them pre-known, as it were, as opposed to just going somebody out the blue.
Yeah.
And then you can start to talk to them a bit more. Then you start to talk about them, the kind of thing that you're looking for, but also you're asking them about what they're looking for. So it isn't a sales conversation. It's a development of a partner.
Yeah. Which then can lead to many other things,
Absolutely.
So is there like any other tips that you can give that would kind of help introverts be themselves more while they're networking?
Yeah, so I think there's a load of others. So I think the big one is focusing on the 5 people, because the reason that works for introverts is because introverts tend to be very good at one-to-one relationships, one-to-one discussions. They're great with. But it's when you say, go and mingle with 100 people, oh, I've got a headache.
Yeah.
So that's why, first of all, that model works well for introverts, because you're focusing on people that really like to help you, and you're doing it in a way that works for you. So the next thing is then, okay, how can I meet more people? Well, the first thing is I would say is focus on 5 rather than spending all your time finding new people. But then if you've got to go to an event, get there early, ? So I've spoken to lots of introverts about this, and people fall into one of 2 camps. Me. Get there early. Well, I hate being at the event. Why the hell would I go there for longer?
Yeah.
So it's really, I struggle with it. However, I know lots of other people and some really superb networking experts as well who train this stuff all the way around the world that would say, go there early, because it allows you to work out the lie of the land. It allows you to see people that come in and approach the ones that you want to when you want to, rather than turning up late, which I don't do, but and going, oh, there's hundreds of people, I've been put off. So you've got to work out which of those 2 is best for you. I think that's the important
That's a really good point, yeah.
And we don't know. Perhaps if you're going to a big event, go with a friend or a colleague or somebody you do know, preferably an extrovert.
Yeah.
Because you can almost use them as your wingman.
I love it. See, this is more like dating than we expected it to be, really.
There's a very good friend of mine that wrote a dating book, and the conversations we had, it was the selling and the networking thing was so similar. But go with a friend, preferably an extrovert, because they can help you, because while they're talking to other people, oh, you need to go and speak to Rebecca. Oh, great. And they come over to you. Oh, I've spoken to John, and he said, so that's really good, because they're helping. But you're helping them as well, because you're in a conversation and the extrovert's going blah, blah, blah. If it's an extrovert you know quite well, they'll probably be honest enough with you to say, sometimes I need somebody to dig me in the ribs to tell me to shut up or whatever. And you'll be in a position to help them with that. So it's not all one way. You've got to work out how you help them.
Yeah.
If you're in an event, do not just chat to the people that you know.
Yeah.
Never do that, because you won't get anywhere. If you're really stuck, and I've done this, and you're going, there's nobody here that I can talk to. Look around the edges of the room. Around the edges of the room are probably other introverts, desperate like you to talk to somebody. So you can just, if you really want to talk to them, go and talk to them. Because they have this other thing, by the way, and we all do this one, introverts and extroverts alike. I can't find my one at the moment, but I have a force field generator to keep people away from me at networking events. Would you like to know what it is? I have, and I bet you've got one too.
Right, go on, tell me. Is it the phone?
You get your phone out of the pocket and you pretend you're doing really important emails or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone backs off. So look around the room for people that are on their phone, and 99 times out of 100, they're actually desperate to speak to people. They've only got their phone out. I mean, you've gone to a networking event, 99 times out of 100, you only got your phone out because you've got no one to speak to and you don't want to look stupid. You don't want to look lonely. Go and talk to those ones.
Yeah.
Because that'd be much easier to get into conversation with.
Because I'd say, like, a lot of, like, introverted people, and just people in general who might struggle in networking situation, might just find the initiation of a conversation very difficult. But if somebody comes to them, then that can put them at ease, because they know that they're kind of wanted in a way,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So be that person, feel good. It comes back to what we were saying earlier. We like to feel good about helping other people. Well, if there's somebody over there that clearly doesn't like networking, because they're on the edge of the room, they're standing on their own and they're using their phone, they don't like, believe me, they don't like, you're helping them. You're not going, I'm desperate. You're going, I'm helping somebody. Suddenly you've got a different mindset. One of the things I said earlier about introverts is that we run out of energy. So if you're at one of these events, have a recharge plan. So that might be, I'm going to go for 2 hours and then I'm going.
Yeah.
So at least you then know what your cut-off point is. Or it might be, every 20 minutes, I'm going to go outside, walk around the building and take 2 minutes of fresh air, and then I can face it, and that just might stave off that might just help you to get through the whole thing.
Very, very good.
So that can make a huge difference. When you're going to go, don't be afraid, go. But don't do the other thing, which is, I don't want to go yet, because when I go, I've got to walk around and say goodbye to everybody, and therefore I'll stay.
Yeah.
And now we're in really bad trouble. When you're going to go, just go. Don't say goodbye, just go.
Would you send an email or a message afterwards to people and say,
and you
really
could always
nice to see you?
Absolutely. But the fatal thing is, oh, goodbye. Oh, yeah, bye. And suddenly you think you've got to do that with 20 people. You're even more exhausted than you were before.
Yeah.
And we talked about the small talk thing. We talked about 2 or 3 things to get into conversation. And the other big one that works really well when you're networking, you know how people, some events have to stand up and introduce themselves and everyone's staring at them for a minute. And they memorize this 1 minute of speech or whatever, they try to. And if you memorize it, it fluffs and it goes completely wrong and you end up feeling really embarrassed and stuttering. Yeah. Don't try and remember it. Keep it really, really simple. I'm John. And then give them an example. So I'm a singing teacher, let's say, and then give them something which you're proud of that you did last week. Last week, I helped a small child learn, I don't know what singing teachers do other than the obvious, but tell them something that happened to you last week that you did that's unusual, or that others will go, oh, wow, that was really good. Because you're telling a little story. And when we tell a little story about ourselves that we're proud of, we naturally stand a bit taller. We naturally feel better about ourselves. And that comes across so well. Yeah. And you haven't got to memorize anything because you're just picking it out of what happened last week. Last week, I, ... And it's a big, big piece.
That's really interesting. Because, it's just about finding ways that we can speak about topics that help us be ourselves more, and that's one of them. So especially as musicians, singers, performers, anyone who works in the creative industry, we thrive off telling stories. We're singing songs to audiences. We thrive off the audience interaction and seeing them react to our art. It's kind of like a form of communication, I think, as well. I know for me, and definitely for other songwriters and singers, sometimes music is like another language, and sometimes when you're introverted, you feel like you're an alien, and you just don't fit in, and people don't understand you, and you don't know what to say to people. But when you're performing, it's like people get it straight away. Yeah. And that feels so good.
So use that and do it when you're networking. Yeah. Tell that story. Do exactly the same skills. Tell a true, it's not making one up, it's telling a true story, because that will be so much easier and it comes across so much better as well. Yeah. And then the other thing you kind of, as you said, we've been joking about introverts or aliens. But the other thing is I've met so many introverts that I've stopped and chatted to who don't use the word introvert because they're embarrassed to use the word introvert. And it has a kind of negative thing. And you look around, and most people that talk about introverts say it in a negative way. So, I'm not going to admit to being an introvert then. But why not? Well, I'm the only one. And when I've talked to people, they haven't said I'm an introvert, but they've told me about feeling tired with people. They told me they don't like going networking. They told me all these things that introverts don't like. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, I must be really, really weird because I'm the only one that's like that. Yeah. And then I've said, what you've just done is defined an introvert, and 33 to 50% of the population are introverts. Therefore, you're one among many. Sorry to burst your balloon, but there are plenty of others who have learned things to help them get over this. And it's actually quite... And suddenly, just the fact that you're not the only one makes a huge difference, and you can feel so much better. So do understand you're definitely not the only one. Do understand that it's not all about you, and stop trying to mimic the behaviour of egotistical extroverts because you're miles away from them.
Yeah, I see. I think that's kind of part of the problem is when, like, one of the most scariest things for me, networking can be very daunting sometimes, but it depends on what mood I'm in and how prepared I am going there. But one of the scariest things for me is like public speaking, so having to like present or like speak in kind of, in that kind of environment. And I think maybe part of the reason for that is that the people who kind of I see doing it well come across as being very extroverted, and maybe we need to see more introverted people doing it in their introverted way, because I think there's some charming ways that you can present that's introverted. It's not like super loud and in your face, but it's charming, it's informative, it's interesting, it is authentic. And I think one of the most important things across so many areas of life is about being authentic to yourself and finding ways to just be truly you, because that's where you'll feel most comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you're being you, you'll always struggle. You won't succeed. So being you, accepting the fact that there are other people out there that are introverts, realizing the skills that brings you. Most introverts are far better at listening. Most introverts are far more structured in their thinking. Most introverts are much better with detail. So you use those facts when you're communicating, when you're working with people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just feel like, I kind of feel there's so many introverted people who don't move forward with their goals and their ideas because they're just so afraid. They're so afraid, and it's like, what are we afraid of? Like, if we mess up, if we give a bad speech or present something badly, or we perform something badly, or our voice cracks when we're singing, like, people are not going to remember that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they're just not. And at the end of the day, we're not perfect. No one is.
But the other thing is, especially while so much networking events are done online at the moment, this is a great time to practice what I'm about to say. But it works face to face as well. If you're really worried about your skills in doing this kind of thing, if you're really worried that you're going to be completely botch it up, number one, most people won't even notice because they don't know what you were going to say, so they can't possibly know that you messed it up. But go somewhere else. So my first networking, true story again, the night before I left my corporate life, my last gig on the Friday evening was I was doing an event in the company, standing up an exhibition centre to presenting on stage to 1,000 or so people. Not a problem. The Monday morning, me talking to 20 people at a networking event. I was petrified. It's crazy, isn't it? Absolutely crazy. But what I'd done, realising I was going to be, I went to a networking event 50 miles up the road. Why? Because even if I screwed it up completely, nobody's going to know me. The stories aren't going to get back to me. It doesn't matter. So realise it doesn't matter. Go further away. Go, I can do this. Because then you realise that it's about being yourself. It's about doing what you know you can do. So practice it somewhere where it's not going to hurt you.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like, your work is predominantly teaching people and businesses how to manage introverts, but
yeah, absolutely.
But introverts need to know how to manage themselves as well.
Yeah, and so there's quite a number of introverts I work with directly on a one-to-one basis and help them to develop their business. But I also realise that the leadership experience I've got from my previous career, then I looked at it and went, yes, I can help introverts, but more importantly, you've got leaders up there, and this is what I call the Introvert Productivity Gap, where a third of people are not properly productive in the business because they're not managed by their manager who doesn't understand introversion. So I said, well, that's an even bigger problem to solve. And I can help more introverts, if I can put it like that, by helping the leaders rather than just the introverts.
Yeah, like, I think in like to link this to what we were saying about, like, a lot of introverts are self-employed. Like, a lot of the time, when I've experienced it a number of times over the years where, like, people who are managing me, or even just people on the team, just were not very understanding or kind to people who are just wired differently. Like, you don't know what person has been through. You don't know if they're introverted. You don't know, they could be on the spectrum. They could have learning difficulties. They could be just painfully shy. They could have had a really bad day. So I think there needs to be like, I think people would probably say they're too busy to like get to know their staff properly. And I think people need to. I think we need to be a bit more understanding and open-minded about the fact that not everyone is going to be like you. You know, the manager, whoever that is, or the person.
Probably nobody is going to be like you.
Because there's only one. Yeah.
And the quicker we understand that, the quicker we understand that whether as managers, whether as leaders, or whether as self-employed people, there's one common thread through all of this. And it's all about communicating with other people. So as a self-employed businessman, I need to communicate with others so I can sell. I need to communicate with others so I can get them to do whatever my job is. So in my case, coaching people to improve their business. I need, as a leader, I need to get people to work harder. As a singer, whatever it is, there's that thread is that communication. And communication is not about what I say. Communication is nothing to do with what I say. It's all about what you do as a result of what I said. And if you didn't understand what I said, if you ignored what I said, you're not going to do anything. So the communication was non-existent. It's all about what the other person does as a result of what you said. And that's the important thing to remember. To do that, you've got to understand the other person.
Yeah, which kind of links into like promoting yourself as well. Do you know, like as the self-employed person or the person who's trying to promote themselves, and introverts hate doing that. It comes back to like understanding what you have to deliver and what your audience need, and seeing how you can connect the two.
Yeah.
Have you any tips on ways that you could figure out what your audience needs, or what your target market?
So I think there's a number of things there, but one of the things I always suggest is that it's a general marketing thing. One of the first book I wrote with my business partner was called The Go-To Expert, and it's all about doing your marketing, and rather than trying to market your business to everybody, to try and pick a much more narrow niche and focusing it on those. And there's a number of reasons for that, but one of the things is you really become an expert on what those particular people need and what those particular people want, and you become an expert on understanding that much more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And when you really understand what your clients want, you're so much more able to, number one, provide it. Number two, talk to them when you're just networking, or whether you're just chatting or having small talk, without having to sell. And number three, if people realize that you're really good, if you're the expert in your area, they start coming to you. Yeah. Rather than the other way around. So you get past all this, I've got to go and sell. Going and forcing yourself on other people doesn't work. It doesn't work properly for extroverts, let alone for introverts. So start by really understanding, how do you do that? Well, firstly, if I'm in a one-to-one conversation, it's about structured questions and questioning people on stuff that they're interested in. Because people will always talk about stuff they're interested in. But also you've got to be prepared to tell a little bit about yourself. One of the reasons that most people I meet know that I am really fanatical about scuba diving. I really am fanatical about it, and I do spend a lot of time under the water. But the other reason I put that out there, when I meet people, do you know what lots of people come up to me and say, oh, you're John, you're the one that likes diving. Tell us about diving.
Yeah.
Oomph. I'm into a conversation about something I like because I made it really easy for them to get into that conversation. And so that's one tip. But coming back to the point, it's about understanding the other people, questioning them in a nice way. So really helping to understand them on a one-to-one basis, but then a group basis. Come back to earlier I said about doing a survey at events. Supposing, and I can do it, I've had detailed conversations with over 500 people in business about introversion. So I can start to tell you about the way introverts think. I can start with a big number of people. Now, I'm not claiming that I know exactly how every introvert thinks, but I can certainly say, in general, this goes on. In general, people get treated. In general, introverts don't like this. Whereas if I hadn't done that, I don't really understand my marketplace. If I understand my marketplace, I can get into those conversations more quickly. How did I do that? By having conversations. By being able to say, Rebecca, could you spend me 2 minutes, please? I'd love to ask you 10 questions. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
A, I learned a huge amount, which helps me with my marketing of my business. B, we would have got into a conversation, which I could have then gone on and deepened that relationship with, or sold to you, or whatever. But importantly, I've got those 10 bits of information across 500 or 600 other people. I've now got a vast database, not of each person, but that says to me, on average, this percentage of people do this and this percentage of people do that. And that's really, really useful.
Yeah, like the more people you talk to, you start seeing patterns, I suppose. So it gives you some authority to talk about it, I would say.
And therefore, people start to come to me and ask about introverts because they know that I've done that. Well, great. And of course, the more people come to me and ask me about that, the more people hear me talking about it, the more people come and recognise me as somebody who knows a lot about it.
Yeah, I mean, I asked you to come on the podcast because you specialise in introversion. So
and it's great. And I could talk about it all day long. So you coming to me saved me having to go, how can I go and talk to somebody else about introverts? Because you come to me. Because of just that. So that's a lovely demonstration of it in practice. Thank you. I hadn't even thought about that one, Rebecca.
Yeah, and I think a few people, when I did the survey, you probably get the same when you talk to people about the topics, but they kind of were, like, it was one or two people who said to me that they hadn't really thought about it so directly until they did the survey, and they said it kind of made them kind of reevaluate the way they approach things. And, you know, I think by having a conversation about it and spreading awareness that, like, it's not a negative thing to be introverted. It just means that you have to find ways to just be your introverted, authentic self in situations, you know.
I mean, I would turn around and I know lots of people think it was negative, and some people say, no, we don't. Well, I'm sorry. Society as a whole, certainly Western business society does. But I flip it around. I'm actually proud to be an introvert. I can tell you, I love the fact that I am, because it makes me who I am. It gives me some amazing skills. It also gives me some challenges, which I have had to learn some tactics to get around, which I can do, which any of us can do.
Mm-hmm.
But that gives me a really rich set of skills.
There's a certain amount of like self-awareness that we need to understand ourselves. That's probably the step one, is to like do a bit of like inward looking and really understand ourselves, what we need, what we don't need, and how we can kind of move forward the way we are. Because if we don't understand ourselves, then we're just kind of going to have a mixed message being thrown out there. People won't really ever get to know us properly. Yeah,
and I think so we could just start by reflecting what works for us and what doesn't. We could start by, if you suspect you're introverted, start looking at some of the stuff about introverts. So my website, which is called introvertinbusiness.co.uk, have lots of articles there about introversion, and a number of people have read those and gone, I read that, I recognised myself, and the tips that came with it were really useful. Great, go and do that. It's not just about my website. There's others out there. There's some great books out there about introversion.
What's your book called? You have a book.
So my book, this one that I mentioned earlier is called Ninja Networking, and that's all about networking in a way that's really useful for introverts.
I love the name, and I'll tell you why. I don't know where it is right now, but I got a hoodie in college, and I've never really had nicknames other than things to do with my height, like half pint, little one, things like that, which I didn't want to get on the hoodie. And anyway, long story short, the name Ninja came up as a nickname, and I remember that somebody's father used to call me Ninja years ago, and so I put Ninja on the back of my hoodie as a nickname. I love it. So it's interesting that you have a Ninja Networking.
But see, the reason I call it ninja networking, because as I said, a ninja is quiet. What are introverts? They tend to be quiet. A ninja is very efficient, and they go from place to place really efficiently and quietly. And what do introverts do? There's that. And then the other thing which a ninja has got is a great big sword. And as I put it on the book, he's got a great big sword to cut through all the bullshit. Am I allowed to say that? Too late. But
go for it.
But it's absolutely right. And so we can cut through some of the stuff, the nonsense. We can start to realise these people are just out there plumping up their own egos. And if you've got some listeners that are starting to go on a journey of developing their own business, and they're going to their first networking events and they're going, I can never do this. There's all these people who sound so proficient and they really know what they're doing. Here's the truth about what happened to me. So when I started my business, I went to these networking events and I saw all these people and I thought, oh God, they're way better than me. I can't do that. They're much better than me. They sound better. Other people, by the way, were telling me I sounded really good, but that's not what we focus on. We focus on what we think is going on. I'd listen to all these people, and all these people are, oh, wow, that's great. After 5 years, I was chatting with somebody, and we were just chatting about the good old days when we first went networking. And then we realised that out of 100 people say that we'd met networking, there was only 5 of them were still in business. And most of the 5 were the quiet ones, not the ones that sounded amazing. And I've spoken to other people about that, and that's true as well. So I just invite your listeners to think about that, because if they're at an event and they're going, oh, I could never be as good as those people there, in all probability, those people there will be gone in a few years' time, and you'll be still there and still be successful. Yeah,
that's so interesting, and it's really, what's the word? Very encouraging to hear that.
And I've seen it happen to me, but I've seen it so many times.
Yeah. So your book, Ninja Networking, what kind of angle is it coming from in the book, just for listeners who might want to check it out?
Okay, so it's what I call a really easy to read book, because I hate books that are really long. It's all about improving your networking so you can develop your small business and grow it. But it's all based on, you don't have to read the whole book. It's probably one of the few books where you get it. You're told not to read the whole book. Not at the end of every page, but almost at the end of every page, there's a question. Yeah. You answer that question, and it tells you what page to then go to. So you're only getting the bits that you need to get.
I love an old interactive book.
Yeah, I just remember as a kid having this book, and it was like a spy adventure or something. And at the bottom of every page, do you want them to, I can't remember what the questions were, but basically you chose what happened in the story, and it was amazing. And I always loved it. And so I wanted to write a book that was easy to read like that. So yeah, Ninja Networking, very much about helping people to develop their networking, but in a very practical way.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about? Was there something else that you mentioned?
So the other thing, that if you've got listeners, we've had a great conversation about introverts. My podcast, which goes out once a week, is all about introversion in business, and it's called Activate Your Introvert. And it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes a week. And every week there's an interview. It's about 10 minutes, so it's shorter than these ones. So it's kind of short, sharp and punchy. And then a section where I give a couple of tips for introverts. And there's a section of introvert myths, which many introverts just laugh at, because they go, yeah, I've heard that. And then we just take the mick out of that for a couple of minutes. But it's all about helping people, either both leaders who need to understand introversion and introverts who need to understand it so they can grow their own business. And so I'd recommend that one as well.
Excellent.
ActivateYourIntrovert.co.uk. It's on all the major podcast channels, but go to that website and you'll find it for the first time.
Brilliant. Well, John, it was so nice speaking to you. I'm delighted that you were able to give me an hour of your time. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I know that it's going to be very valuable to our listeners as well. So thank you.
Fantastic. All right then. Great. Thanks, Rebecca.
Repeat.